Hey everyone, welcome back to Talking Success. Following on our theme here of everything kind of financial crime over the last few weeks, I'm delighted to welcome Jonny Bell, who I briefly met a couple of weeks ago in Johannesburg as he was battling to get back home to Dubai after the horrendous floods, and he was delayed in Joburg kind of for a day or so. But it's great to have him here today. Jonny's based in Dubai, obviously, and he's British. So I'm talking to a fellow Brit today, and we're talking things financial crime, fraud, risk, and everything to do with LexisNexis Risk Solutions, which is obviously who Jonny works for. So, Jonny, great to have you on board. Thanks so much. I'm glad you made it back to Dubai and your place wasn't underwater and your car hadn't been washed away, because that would have been quite a mission to try and get resolved in the UAE, having lived there for a number of years myself. I know things like that tend to be a little bit arduous. But it's good to have you here. Thanks so much for joining. For those people who may be tuning in for the first time, perhaps don't know, obviously, you, and don't know LexisNexis Risk Solutions, if you can give us a quick kind of overview in terms of who you are, how you ended up in the Middle East, and what LNRS do, which is LexisNexis Risk Solutions, everyone. I'm allowed to abbreviate, but Jonny's not. So there you go.
Brilliant. Thank you for having me on. I needed my armbands to get out of Dubai airport, but got there safely in the end. So a little bit about me. So my name's Jonny Bell. I'm a Senior Director for Europe, Middle East and Africa for LexisNexis Risk Solutions. I've been at the company for just over 2 years now. Prior to that, I was at Refinitiv, or now known as a London Stock Exchange Group. And then prior to that, I was in the world of consulting, working for the Boston Consulting Group. So about 10 years in the world of corporates and financial services. In terms of my role at LexisNexis Risk Solutions, I'm responsible for essentially the commercial strategy of the business. So making sure that we can continue to offer market-leading solutions in the way of software and data to the Europe, Middle East and African market. And also looking at how we can continue to grow our revenue base in the most sustainable way for the business. If you're not familiar with LexisNexis Risk Solutions, the clue's in the name. We offer risk solutions or solutions to help firms mitigate risk, and that risk could be compliance risk, it could be fraud risk, it could be credit risk. It all rolls up into LexisNexis Risk Solutions. About 10,000 employees globally, headquartered out of Atlanta in the US, and a global footprint. So customers in hundreds of countries and different jurisdictions around the world.
And it's cross-sector as well. It's not just financial services, correct? I mean,
Yeah.
One thing I really wanted to talk to you about today was a fireside chat that you moderated at the event in Johannesburg with on the wildlife side and wildlife trafficking. And I think when people think about sort of compliance and risk and fraud and things like that, there's very much a lens, or maybe that's just the world I live in. The lens is very much focused on financial services and FSBs, and how they can get how they can comply with regulations and ever changing sort of sanction lists and what have you. But actually, there's kind of a more I suppose heart-wrenching side of compliance, right? We'll talk about the human trafficking side potentially in a bit. But what blew me away was the work that you guys are doing on wildlife trafficking, and how using data you've been able to really put stops in place and controls in place to limit how this works. I'd love to, for those of you who weren't at this event, Jonny, if you can give a quick kind of synopsis of what you guys are doing in the wildlife trafficking side, because honestly, for me, I was kind of sitting there with kind of gobsmacked a little bit about A, the trade itself, and B, the impact that solutions like LNRS offer and how that combats things like that. So if you can give us an overview, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think you hit the nail on the head. Really, is people often associate financial crime with purely financial institutions, and the reality is, when we talk about financial crime, we're talking about lots of other crimes as well. So we would refer to them as predicate crimes, and so the Financial Action Task Force outlines lots of different predicate crimes which in turn are funded by financial crime or contribute to financial crime. So those crimes include things like narcotics trafficking, human trafficking, wildlife trafficking. And I was guilty of anyone more than ever that I didn't really see myself being associated with the world of wildlife trafficking too much when working with financial institutions. When in reality, what actually happens is if you're a financial institution and you allow a new customer to come on board that's associated with wildlife trafficking, then effectively your financial institution or the financial services ecosystem could be funding the organized crime group or the individual that's conducting that wildlife trafficking. So there are real world impacts to the solutions that we provide, and we are through our data and software able to prevent some of these predicate crimes that contribute to the world of financial crime. In terms of our data, yeah, go on.
I was going to say, but it's broader than just sort of doing some checks on an entity that's setting up a bank account with X bank, regardless of where they are. There's a lot more to it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So a financial institution is just one pillar in the world of dismantling organized crime networks. And what we've found has been really, really successful in recent years is the emergence of public-private partnerships. You may have heard of them as PPPs, where there's information sharing across different types of institutions. So if a financial institution flags something that looks slightly risky, they can then tell enforcement agencies, government bodies, regulators, non-profit organizations. They all share this information, which can help dismantle these criminal networks. And there's lots of different case studies in the market at the moment around how one financial institution has suspected a dodgy transaction. They've shared this information with a local law enforcement agent, and it's resulted in multiple convictions, multiple enforcement actions, and prevented the loss of lives of humans, loss of lives of animals around the world.
And you seeing sort of trends. I know that, forgive me, the lady that was on stage with you, I forget her name, apologies, but she was talking about some of the sort of wildlife tracking that I'd never even contemplated. I mean, there was kind of animals that I thought, really? I mean,
Yeah.
that's are there any sort of emerging trends? Are you seeing different regions sort of looking at or more guilty of certain sort of imports than others, or was it particularly from Africa out to sort of Asia, or from Asia over to Europe or China or wherever it may be?
Yeah, so the lady on stage was Geraldine Fleming, and she's head of the Financial Task Force for United for Wildlife, which is a program set up by the Prince and Princess of Wales Royal Foundation. But they have identified thousands and thousands of different trade routes around the world and animals being trafficked. But we actually looked at our data as part of that talk as well to understand what species and what countries are being flagged as wildlife trafficking hotspots. So in the way of species, and I can provide the link to the white paper after this, but in the way of species, the number one most trafficked animal in the world, according to our data, and it's been ratified by experts as well, is the pangolin, which not many people are familiar with, but it's commonly trafficked for its scales. So they are killed and then the scales taken off and then used for medicinal purposes, or typically medicinal purposes. And then the two other most trafficked animals after that are elephants, commonly trafficked for their ivory, and then lions and tigers, again, trafficked for meat purposes and medicinal purposes. So these are all trends that are coming directly as a result of LexisNexis Risk Solutions data, but ratified by United for Wildlife's research experts as well. And then in terms of trade routes, I'm probably not the best person to talk about the intricacies of different trade routes, but what we did see was the richer the biodiversity of a country, the more likely that country is being exposed to some form of wildlife trafficking, or the wildlife being trafficked out of that country.
And then obviously moving on from wildlife trafficking, which is probably the next element for me anyway, which was kind of heart wrenching, was the human trafficking side,
Yeah.
and again the work that you guys are doing in partnership with others to combat that and to work with authorities to ensure that this becomes an historic problem and not something sort of we take into the future. Given the data that LexisNexis Risk Solutions obtains and has, I
Mm.
imagine your data lake is rather large. Are you able to sort of piece together different parts of the puzzle? All right, so you've got maybe a financial institution here, you've got maybe a fraudulent merchant, you've maybe got, because obviously whenever it comes to illicit trade, there's always going to be some trade, unless it's pure cash.
Mm.
There is always going to be some element of a digital or digital footprint. Are you able to kind of track back and sort of join the dots? I mean, is that essentially what your one of your products does, or one of your solutions is to really sort of join these dots together?
Yeah, so one thing we talk about in the industry a lot is the convergence of fraud and anti-money laundering, and that's really effectively what we're talking about here. Is we understand that if someone is involved with human trafficking, it's an organised crime leader involved with human trafficking, the likelihood is they're not trying to access the world's financial services system through using their own name, because the likelihood is they're probably a sanctioned individual already, or there's some enforcement action against them. So typically what they'll do is they'll use mule accounts, they'll use fraudulent activities to access the world's financial services ecosystem. So we are completely conscious of this, and as a result, some of the products that we brought to market and acquired in the last couple of years have really been to answer for this. So how do we work with our customers to make sure that they can be aware of fraudulent activities that could be happening to their consumers, but also aware of the money laundering activities that could be happening as well. So there's some platforms that we've brought to market recently, which aim to solve for this convergence of fraud and anti-money laundering.
It was interesting because I was chatting with your colleague Jason Lane Sellers last
Yes,
week
yeah.
before, and he was saying actually, the world of fraud hasn't actually changed, right? Just the different methods have, right? So
Mm.
there's always been an element of someone trying to get something from an unassuming, individual or institution. It's just evolved in terms of how that's done, and it's
Yeah.
become way more organized and a lot more sophisticated. But I guess, in the world that you operate in, it sounds a bit like playing whack-a-mole. And that's the only way I can kind of describe it, right? Literally, you've shut one thing down, and then suddenly something else pops up. Does that make your job a lot harder? Does it make it actually more interesting from a personal perspective? And is there an end game, or do you think this is always going to be kind of this constant game of whack-a-mole, trying to defeat these illicit individuals or organizations who are trying to defraud or launder money or traffic wildlife or humans
Yeah.
or anything else? What's your view on that?
Yeah, I mean, Jason's absolutely right. The whole context of fraud and financial crime. I think illicit organisations and people that are involved in illicit activities will always try and find new, innovative ways to be that launder money or access fraudulent accounts. What we have found, and what Jason probably alluded to, is that it's become much more digitized now. So as an organisation, we then need to evolve our services to ensure that we are meeting the needs of our customers who are having to evolve to combat these criminals and illicit activities and bad actors in being able to penetrate their services. So it's I hesitate to call it exciting, because I feel like it would be wrong to say that, but it keeps us busy, it keeps us on our toes, and it helps us continually evolve our products and services to meet the needs of the customers as bad actors and criminals try to digitize and innovate in the way that they're conducting these activities.
You mentioned the Financial Action Task Force, and I think it'd be remiss of us not to discuss, the grey listing
Yeah.
and a couple of countries that in Africa, anyway, who have been grey listed are on the grey list at the moment. And I've been quite close to this sort of subject and working with the regulators and understanding sort of why this happened. So there's the why, and then there's the okay. Let's ensure this doesn't happen again. And um, I think where I'm slightly confused, or where I perhaps need some clarification, is for enterprise organizations, so your banks, your insurance companies, your manufacturing companies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, who have got compliance teams, have got budgets for compliance, are regulated and are audited, and et cetera. Then I can understand them coming to LexisNexis Risk Solutions and saying, "Listen, we need to plug this gap, or we need to ensure that we're compliant in this area." Given that part of the grey listing was due to things like MPOs, money laundering through MPOs, there was things like source of funds. So if you're buying a house, or let's use that one as an example. If I'm buying a house and I'm buying through a real estate agent here in South Africa, and it's not one of the big firms. It's a smaller firm. Maybe there's 2 or 3 people. Same
Yeah.
with law firms as well. They're not all, the ENSs of this world. A lot of them are very small, 2, 3, lawyers or attorneys. How do they go about ensuring compliance? Because I wouldn't imagine they've got the sort of budget, well, they wouldn't have the sort of budgets and the compliance teams and processes in place in order to ensure that they can sort of prove source of funds, etc. Are,
Mm.
are, are there different solutions, or are there some sort of solutions for sort of SME players to ensure that they are compliant and they're not going to get stung with big fines?
Yeah, I mean, a great question. So I think the context to a country going on the FATF grey list is there's been an investigation into that country by FATF and they've proved or have insight that that country has deficient processes, controls in place to prevent money laundering. So all of those examples that you've just given around real estate firms, law firms, so we categorize them as DNFBPs, so designated non-financial businesses and professions, which is a bit of a mouthful, but what we found in a lot of countries that have been put onto the FATF grey list is many regulations around DNFBPs and then NBFIs, so non-banking financial institutions, have not been sufficient. And so really the first step that needs to happen in those countries that are being grey listed is the emergence or introduction of regulations around the DNFBP sectors and NBFI sectors. Now, once that happens, the firms in those space, so those small SMEs, real estate firms, law firms, would need to do something about that. Now, they can be proactive. They understand that regulations coming down the pipe, so they can be proactive. But if they are being reactive and looking at implementing solutions, you're absolutely right. Not all of these firms have the big compliance budgets and big financial crime compliance budgets that financial institutions have. So all of these firms, not huge budgets, they're becoming regulatory obligated. What they can do is engage with vendors like LexisNexis Risk Solutions, who are able to streamline a lot of those services, take a lot of the remediation activities away from the firms in hand. So if it is a 2-man, 3-man shop, they can use software, they can use our data that helps streamline all of this, helps them remain efficient, but it also helps them meet their regulatory obligations. So it takes a lot of the operational overhead away from doing manual compliance searches and manual financial crime compliance screening processes. Yeah,
I'll make you laugh. I because I like to think I'm a lot younger than I am. I do have a TikTok account, and I was on TikTok a couple of weeks ago, and clearly, they know my searching habits, and I'll keep it clean, I promise. But this thing was served up to me, and it was an example, it was a guide to how to launder money through a lawyer, right?
wow. Okay.
And this was just, it was like animated, right? So the concept, and by the way, I'm not advocating for anyone to try this, okay? This is just an example, was that, said person would walk into a law firm and say, I want to retain you for this bit of litigation. I'm going to deposit some funds to you. Now, the law firm in question went, yeah, okay, no problem. You can remit some funds to me and we'll keep it in our trust account and earn some interest. Great. Remitted funds. Said law firm did maybe one letter, one correspondence, and then individual turned around and said, actually, I've decided not to litigate. Can you pay me my money back, please? And they said, yeah, sure. Where would you like it paid to? And he said, this account, clean money. And I thought, wow, surely it can't be that simple. I spoke to a couple of lawyers that I know that do work for bigger firms. No, we never do that. We run all our checks and we run all our balances. But I imagine that that's kind of a route that people could exploit, and perhaps the law firm unwittingly went, okay, well, it seems a pretty legitimate transaction. We've done our KYC, and we know that this individual, we featured this individual here in South Africa, and we know this individual is legit, and we can tick the compliance box. But they haven't necessarily looked at source of funds. So, is it important when organizations are looking at obviously becoming compliant and remaining compliant, again, taking perhaps some of the enterprise organizations out of this example for a moment, is it important they take a more holistic view over the individual, the entity that they are engaging with? Have you got a view on that? Is that just a must do, or again, is it education?
So I think you're right, and I think it comes back to what we discussed earlier around criminals always finding new ways to launder money, and that's a good example, right? Someone's exploited the legal services industry to try and launder money, but the same thing happens across lots of other industries as well. Real estate's a really good example. There's still plenty of countries around the world now where you can make cash purchases of commercial real estate, residential real estate, without there being any source of wealth checks or understanding of where that money is coming from. So as soon as that money then goes into real estate, or that specific piece of real estate, it becomes clean. So I think there is obviously the screening aspect to it. So there should be the expectation that if a firm or a law firm or a real estate firm is taking the funds off of someone, they need to know who that person is. Which is what would happen in a typical KYC process. But there is also additional stuff that they should be doing in the way of enhanced due diligence, a source of wealth being one of those, understanding their credit liabilities, understanding if they're associated with any other entities. So we would call that unwrapping of ultimate beneficial owners. So if they are an owner of a company, or if it's an entity that's engaging with the law firm, what network links do they have to other entities that may be associated with predicate crimes or money laundering? So lots and lots of different investigative due diligence that can be done within the DNFBP sector, and it's not just the DNFBP sector. We will see that across the entire financial services sector as well, and other industries. But I always think in highly regulated markets where regulators have outlined what institutions and firms need to do in the way of enhanced due diligence, they're much better than some countries where they are lagging a little bit behind in regulating those peripheral industries like real estate, law firms, insurers.
Let's go back to kind of the beginning, which was FSPs and the sort of compliance and the the ever changing kind of regulatory landscape that these FSPs face. When let's use a bank as perhaps an example here, when they are looking at things like insider trading. We're talking about an investment bank, or we're talking about brokerage or a hedge fund or whatever it may be. And there is obviously a lot of scrutiny on insider trading. Is that something that LexisNexis Risk Solutions has got some sort of solution or service for? Is that very difficult to establish? I've never really understood that sort of world. I've never been an investment banker for my sins, but maybe I should have been. But how does that work? Because I know that's a big part of financial crime as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's definitely something that we're looking at. If you look at our portfolio of products within the FCC business, there's probably not something which is that can be easily deployed to help answer for that issue. But if I look and look at what's happening in the industry at the moment, there are solutions out there which will help detect insider trading. So it'll look at things like it'll be monitoring all of the activity that's going on your phone, monitoring activities that's going on your on whatever you're trading on your trading platform. It'll also do things like it will monitor your voice and the tone of voice that you're using, or if you're using slang terms. So there's lots of ways, lots of solutions out there that are being implemented by banks that are trading on a daily basis to understand whether there are illicit trading activities going on. But within LexisNexis Risk Solutions in the FCC division, it's we're more further down the line, further down the value chain when it comes to the solutions we offer in the FCC space.
So look, it wouldn't be a podcast in 2024 if we didn't mention the 2-letter acronym, the AI, and you've kind of just alluded to a little bit, right? So using things like voice analytics, trends, data trends, and what have you. Where do you see sort of AI happening in the world, or really coming into effect and making a plausible difference in the world of sort of risk solutions? Are you seeing it already? Are there sort of projects that are already live, or maybe in pilot stage or beta stage, that are using not necessarily generative AI? And I think that there's a big difference between generative AI, as in ChatGPT, and true AI, which is artificial intelligence. What sort of trends are you seeing in that world?
Yeah, so we're seeing the emergence of firms looking to adopt more AI, RPA, machine learning based solutions. Now, if you'd have looked at the compliance industry 5-10 years ago, I think they were quite far removed from even looking at adopting things like that. But what we are seeing more and more now with many of the institutions we're working with is there's actually a top-down level drive, not just in the world of compliance, but from the C-suite, that are looking to, when they're going out to RFPs, to have the keywords AI, RPA, machine learning throughout a procurement process that they're going through, be that in the world of compliance, be that in the world of HR. They are looking to adopt more AI-based tools to help operational efficiency. Now, that I think within the world of compliance, we're still going through that process, and FCC going through that process to see where it kind of lands. But it's definitely picking up pace, and 2024 has been a transformative year in the world of procuring solutions.
So you're seeing actually customers that you're going to, sort of saying, "What's can AI solve this?" Or, "Oh, really? Wow,
yeah.
wow."
If you look at in South Africa, I presented on our total cost of compliance study, which is where we looked at how much firms are spending on conducting compliance and financial crime compliance. And we break down that budget. We break down a typical budget, and over half of that budget was spent on operational overhead. So that the money for labour costs, the money for salaries, and the money for that outsourced third-party providers, so your BPOs of the world. Over half of a typical firm's entire compliance budget was effectively spent on people. So when you look at that in from a total cost of compliance perspective, i.e., hundreds and hundreds of $1 billion around the world, that's a lot of money where AI providers can come in and streamline a lot of those processes through the use of AI and machine learning capabilities, and reduce operational overhead, but also remaining regulatory compliant and efficient at the same time.
And have you, or maybe not yourselves at LexisNexis Risk Solutions, but maybe industry-wide, has there been any sort of checks and balances where it's comparing human interaction to AI? Obviously, there has been in the world of medicine, even in chess, right? But has that sort of Has that been played out in the world of compliance and risk? And what, if so, what has that kind of shown?
Yeah. So plenty of financial institutions around the world now are looking at how they can streamline their compliance processes when it comes to operational overhead. So those engagements are happening. They're happening with LexisNexis Risk Solutions. It's an ongoing process. I think if you go through these POV stages with institutions and you're comparing the effectiveness of 100 employees versus the effectiveness of a new solution. If at the end of the POV it comes out and it's 5% more effective to adopt a platform or a solution, then probably doesn't make sense financially to go through that process. Now, if you're reaching into kind of the 40-50% region, then I think the story then becomes a bit more compelling.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, my sort of view on this, my view is that can a financial institution or any institution that's certainly regulated, can they afford to have any mishaps? So can they afford to let anything get through the net? We've seen some mad fines in terms of monetary values to the likes of HSBC and Citibank and other banking institutions across the world. Was that because of just one thing slipped through the net, or was it a case of actually there was a breakdown in process somewhere, and there was a large amount of sort of transactions or illicit trades or traders or whatever it may be coming through that? So, does the regulator give a little bit of leeway, or are they saying absolutely not? One comes through and we're going to come down on you, like a ton of bricks.
Yeah, so it's interesting actually, and interesting point. We've seen regulators in the last few years become more open to firms adopting these type of AI machine learning techniques and tools in their workflows. Now, alongside that, there's also got to be the regulators have got to be cognizant of the fact that in some instances maybe these machines making the decisions and not people making the decisions. So I think there's a level of confidence from the regulators, a level of confidence from the financial institutions in these solutions that they're adopting. But what we typically see in the world of financial crime compliance, if there are any exceptionally difficult decisions to make, be that in the onboarding process or in the transaction monitoring process, there is usually it's usually investigated by a human at the end of whatever AI capabilities they've adopted.
It would kind of be flagged, would it? It would be flagged as a kind of need to do a bit more DD on this person or this individual or this transaction.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah.
Okay. And I guess my last question for you, Jonny, and I usually play this one quite carefully because I don't like politics on this show. Actually, I don't like politics anywhere. But when we come to talking about corruption, is that classed as a financial crime? If so, are there any solutions that LexisNexis Risk Solutions offer? And if there are, how difficult is that sell, I'm going to say, to certain institutions or governments that perhaps don't want this uncovered or don't want this investigated? How is I'd hate to be a salesman selling that bit of software, because that must be literally hitting your head against brick walls. But what is where do you guys sit with that? Because it's very complex, clearly very political, and very top of mind, and with the amount of elections that are going on across the world this year, I'm sure that corruption is something that's on the tips of most people's lips at the moment.
Yeah, so it absolutely falls within the world of financial crime compliance. So when we typically talk about financial crime compliance, we're talking about anti-money laundering, counter of financing of terrorism or counter-terrorist financing. You can see it interchangeable, and then anti-bribery and corruption, so ABC. So those three all roll up into the world of financial crime compliance. I think one trend that we do see within the bribery and corruption world is a lot of it is paper-based. It's underhand. It's not necessarily using digital means of corrupting individuals or corrupting entities. So it can be quite hard to track via software and data. But one thing that we several solutions that we do have use our screening data. So our screening data takes information on sanctioned individuals, politically exposed persons, individuals that may be prone to bribery and corruption, and also adverse media from around the world. So if anyone at any point has been associated with bribery and corruption, and that appears on the internet, then the firms that they're engaging with will be made aware of that, so they can then make a decision as to whether they want to onboard that person as a new customer or offboard them as a customer if they are already engaged with that institution. So it's more of a data play, and ensuring that these officials or individuals that have been exposed to bribery and corruption, the institutions that they're dealing with are made aware of this on a proactive basis.
Just picking up on one point before we close off, you mentioned, some of the data points are looking at news stories that perhaps have been published. Now, again, we live in the age of fake news, deep fakes, etc., etc. I would imagine it's relatively easy for someone to create a news story about an individual, get that posted online, however they go and do that. So someone could be potentially, wrongly accused or discredited with no foundation or no evidence because it's just someone's put it on the internet. How would you go about doing that? How would that work? Is there an element of sort of sanity checking that data source, or again, is it just a flag to the institution saying you probably want to investigate, and then it's over to you to kind of do your due diligence and do your sort of additional checks and balances?
Yeah, so when we look at the world of adverse media and negative news, from our perspective, we deal within the world of structured adverse media. So we have a set of source websites that we would go to, which are respectable, reputable news agencies that we can reference. And then there's the whole other side of unstructured adverse media, which we don't include in our database currently, but it equally could be important information, which is where that example you've just given would sit. That would sit within the unstructured world of adverse media.
Okay, so you're not looking at sort of people's Facebook feeds and
No.
Twitters or X's and TikToks and whatever. No, okay, so it's looking at, I would imagine, Wall Street journals. It's looking at New York Times. It's looking at the Times in the UK. It's looking at big publications, reputable, that you have some credibility.
Yeah, and look, the industry is shifting as well. I think from the unstructured adverse media side, it's perhaps less of a regulatory obligation to do that. So I don't think lots of firms are regulatory obliged to look at people's Facebook profiles and whatnot. But there are firms that are wanting to understand their reputational risk. So if there's a high risk entity or a high risk individual, perhaps go down that more investigative side of due diligence and look at sources of information like unstructured adverse media.
Yeah, you're about to open a can of worms here when I start talking about sort of HR policies and employers looking at sort of Facebooks saying, would I want you representing my firm? That's not for another day. John, listen, thanks so much. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I must say, I really enjoyed the event you guys held in Joburg as well. I learned a hell of a lot. And I've even got the book. I just don't have it here sitting next to me, but I promise you Gary made sure I had one. So I'm on chapter 1, and I did say that last week as well. It's just been a bit crazy. I've moved house and everything in between. But if people want to look up LexisNexis Risk Solutions in terms of some of the solutions that you offer, the services that you guys offer, you run Middle East, Africa, Europe. Are you a good point of call to start with, or is it the website? Because I know you've got a really good team here in South Africa. You've got some representatives across the continent as well. Where do people go to find out some more information?
Yeah, so if you're in Africa, we've got a fantastic team based out of South Africa and Ghana. So Donovan Byrne is the sales director. I would direct any first questions to him. Have a look on our website as well. All of our solutions are on there, and some of the things, some of the product demos and data insights are on there as well. And then we are a global company. If you're listening or watching from outside of Africa, feel free to contact myself, and I can direct you within the organisation.
Wonderful. Well, we'll put some links at the bottom of this podcast,
Great.
anyways, and I'll get the links to some of the reports that you guys have released recently as well. They'll be at the bottom. Jonny, listen, thanks so much. I'm glad you're not sitting there with a snorkel on and flippers, and weather has dried up a little bit in Dubai. Thanks again, and I hope to see you very soon.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Pleasure. Take care. Cheers.